You're on the clock. You need a wide receiver. Jaylen Waddle and Davante Adams are both there. Which one do you go with? We're going to look at that, both the pros and cons of each player. And let's start with Jaylen Waddle, and let's start with the good stuff. Let's start with the positives. He got paid big money this year, right? Which shows that he is clearly a focal point of that Dolphins offense. He's going to be there for the foreseeable future, and he is going to be involved. His production did drop a little bit last year as it relates to touchdowns, but it was 1 year. The year before that, he was very involved in the red zone and put up 258 fantasy points that season. So very, very respectable, and that's more than you can ask for with where he's being drafted. He's also at a prime age right now. He's 25. Not that he had many rookie mistakes. I mean, he came on the field and looked like a pro's pro pretty much right away. But now he's truly seasoned. He's been there for a little bit. He's experienced. So all those play in favor for Jaylen Waddle. Now, the cons, it does look as though the Dolphins are setting up a true three-headed monster approach, right? They had Davante, Raheem Mostert, and now they've went and got Jaylen Wright as well. So they could really be leaning on that run game. And when I think they're going to lean on that run game is when they have a big lead. And we know the Dolphins tend to get early leads, so they could probably rely more on that run game to close games out. Also worth noting, and it's just last year, we can't always use last year as a metric for this year, right? Seasons are always different, but you should put at least a little bit of stock into last year. The opponents that the Dolphins are facing this year, only 5 of them fell in the bottom half of the league for yards allowed last year. So they have an uphill battle as it's concerned with passing defenses. All right, turn the table. Let's go look at Davante Adams. And let's start with the cons. He's 31 years old. He is getting up there, which we know might make players more susceptible to injury. They might slow down a little bit. So can't do anything about his age. Let's look at the quarterback situation, because that's the other big concern that everybody has. Is it going to be Aidan O'Connell or Gardner Minshew? How many points per game did Davante Adams average with Aidan O'Connell over the last 5 last season? 19.4 fantasy points per game. After him and Aidan O'Connell had that opportunity to establish some chemistry, they had a pretty good rapport, and he averaged 19.4 fantasy points per game over the last 5. Now, I kind of hope they go with Aidan O'Connell, but we know that all signs are pointing to Gardner Minshew, right? They brought him in, they paid him that money. He's the veteran, so let's say they go with Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew is kind of like a Jimmy Garoppolo type figure, right? He very rarely blows you out of the water, but he's proven that he can make wide receivers serviceable in fantasy football, right? At the end of the day, he did make Michael Pittman a 1,000-yard receiver last year. So Gardner Minshew can get the job done. What I'm way more excited about is the new offensive coordinator for the Raiders, Luke Getsy, coming over from the Chicago Bears. And did anybody see what he did with DJ Moore last season? DJ Moore became one of the best wide receivers finally in fantasy football, and his catch rate skyrocketed. He was involved in every asset. And I had him in my redraft league, and that night where he put up 50 fantasy points on a Thursday night game, man, I was celebrating. You felt like you won your week right there. But even more so than his resume with the Bears, let's look at his resume with the Packers when he was there with Davante Adams. Now, the year before Luke Getsy came to Green Bay to be their passing game coordinator, Davante Adams did have a little bit of an off year. He only had 83 yards per game, which, I mean, that is respectable. He had 7 receptions per game, respectable, but he was not involved in the red zone game at all. He averaged a touchdown in only 40% of his games. He had 5 touchdowns over 12 games. Fast forward, once Luke Getsy came in, we saw Davante Adams really, truly explode and have those best seasons of his career. During the 2 years when Luke Getsy was there, Davante Adams averaged 98 yards per game, 8 receptions per game, and averaged a touchdown every single game. He put up 23.8 fantasy points as his average over those 2 years. So I'm really excited to see what that reunion of Davante Adams and Luke Getsy will do. And just like we did for the Dolphins and took a look at their 2024 opponents, again, we can't use this as a metric. Every season is a little bit different, but you do put a little bit of stock in it. 9 of their opponents fell in the bottom half of the league for yards allowed last season. So that looks like they have a pretty nice schedule where over 50% of their opponents are going to be bottom half defenses. So between these two, Jaylen Waddle, Davante Adams, I would go with Davante Adams this year. Now, I do think Jaylen Waddle in a couple seasons, once Tyreek Hill's out of there, will put up those very consistent, fantastic seasons, and he'll probably start being a high second round draft pick. But as it relates to 2024, it's going to be Davante Adams for me. If you're enjoying this channel, check out some of our other videos. Right here, we've got our 3 favorite props for the season that are available right now. And right here, we've got our rounds 5 through 9 fantasy rankings, where we tell you what players to avoid and what players to target in those rounds. As always, I definitely appreciate it if you help this channel grow by hitting subscribe and check back, because we'll be bringing you fantasy, props, and DFS as soon as the season starts, all off season and season long.